Thank you for tuning in to the Voice of the Victim podcast. We discuss a lot of sad and potentially triggering things on this show. We try to be as sensitive and cautious as possible, but if you are sensitive to things involving abuse and may be triggered, please think twice before listening to our show.
Welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast. My name's Ryan.
And I'm Rosie.
How are you doing tonight, Rosie?
I'm doing okay. It feels like fall, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I'm wearing a good sweater, so...
Yeah, you look cozy. I'm excited to wear sweatpants, but that's just me. Before we get into our story for the night, we want to announce our t-shirt winner for the month of August.
Ooh.
Heather.
Woohoo!
So congratulations, Heather. Your t-shirt's on its way.
Yay!
And yeah, we really appreciate you and the support you've given us.
Definitely. And so does Burrito.
Oh, hi, buddy. So before we get into the story, you want to share the 5-star review?
Sure. It's entitled, I Have Grown With You Guys. I found you when my daughter innocently introduced me to my newest addiction, true crime podcasts. Randomly downloading podcasts, searching for new ones to feed my addiction, Voice of the Victim made its way to my library, and I've been entranced ever since. Your voices, sensitivity, sincerity, and compatibility have kept me invested in your podcasts, and I feel like I have grown in my podcast adventures, as you two have grown in your confidence and powerful exertion in each story you cover. Love, love, love you guys, and look forward to each newly posted episode. Highly recommend to all my friends when they ask what I'm listening to now. 5 stars all the way. Aww.
Wow.
That's so nice.
Thank you, Yuga Peaches. Hopefully that's how it's pronounced. That's so sweet. I never thought we'd be reading a review like that. Highly recommend to all my friends. That's like,
so
what?
Nice.
So thank you for that. Oh, I want to give a shout out to Josiah.
Oh,
I heard through the grapevine that one of our friends who moved away last year listens to our podcast, so just want to say hi.
Joe. Hey, Joe.
I guess he gave us a shout out on Snapchat.
I guess he did.
Thanks for that, Josiah.
Yeah, how's
that.
Oregon?
Yeah,
That's
I wish we lived there with you. It'd be fun. But anyway, thank you for that. This episode of Voice of the Victim podcast is supported by Best Fiends. So you've probably heard of Best Fiends by now. They have over 100 million global downloads, so everyone's playing it. Many of us have a lot of free time right now, and one of my favorite ways to fill that time is with mobile games. And Best Fiends is one of my go-to choices. It challenges your brain with fun puzzles, but it's super laid back and casual because no one needs more stress at a time like this.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely my favorite game to play on my phone.
Yeah, will you explain it to our listeners in case they haven't heard of it?
Sure. So pretty much Best Fiends is a puzzle game where you have to get different leaves or flowers in a row, and then you're going to beat the slug bosses and also win different prizes. So it's just super much fun, and then you can collect different bugs. Right now it's like a rock concert theme going on, and currently I'm in the charity concert and country shindig.
Shindig.
Those are the missions that I'm doing right now.
Nice.
It's so cute.
That's what's so cool about it, is that it never gets old because they always have cool events like this. They update it every month with new events. And also you don't need to be connected to the internet to progress through the game. So no matter where you happen to be, if you can't connect to the internet, you're still good to go to progress through your levels. So engage your brain with fun puzzles and collect tons of cute characters. Trust me, with over 100 million downloads, this 5-star rated mobile puzzle game is a must-play. Just download Best Fiends free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. So tonight's story is quite a doozy. It's the story of 5 children named Nahtahn, Merah, Elias, Gabriel, and Abigail/Elaine Marie Jones. I'll get into why she has two names later. But their parents are Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser. So let's talk about them first.
All right. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser got married in June of 2004 in a suburb west of Chicago, Illinois. He was 22 and she was 18 years old. They had a strong relationship, bonding over the fact that neither of them were very close with their families.
Yeah, Amber said she really wasn't speaking with her family at the time, and Timothy's family was down in Mississippi. He was up in Illinois, so a lot of distance there. But I think that's pretty common when you're clashing with your blood relatives and you opt to make your own family instead. You know, you can choose who you're close to.
2 years later, in 2006, they had a daughter and named her Merah Gracie Jones. In 2007, Elias Jones was born, and the year after that, Nahtahn was born. With 3 young children to care for, Timothy began attending Mississippi State University to study computer engineering. In 2011, he graduated and began working for Intel at an office in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah, so the family relocated to South Carolina.
In 2012, Gabriel Jones was born, and by early spring of that year, I just can't believe that she was pregnant again with their 5th child, Abigail.
I know, it had to be like right after Gabriel was born.
I know. They are little bunnies, aren't they?
But things were a bit rocky with Timothy and Amber at this time, and in May of that year, they began seeking marriage and family counseling, which seems to be a step in the right direction, you know,
Totally.
making an effort.
Now, the kids really loved both of their parents, and the 2 of the parents loved each other. But despite that, they would end up having fights over any little thing that came up. And at times, their confrontations would even become violent, sparking outbursts from both sides. Despite this toxic relationship, they never split up because they didn't want to put the kids through that situation.
Yeah, and that's a tough situation to live through. And as much as I believe it's best for kids to live with both parents, if they're doing their jobs right, I think the benefits of that are dwarfed by the long-term damage of constantly witnessing violent outbursts like this.
Right.
From the people who are supposed to set an example and be teaching you how to live and shaping you into what you ultimately become. So obviously, if they're having fights like this in front of their children, that's a huge problem. And, they both needed to take some responsibility and not become violent in front of the kids or at all, But that was easier said than done. And Amber started to realize that this environment was not good for her kids.
In early spring of 2012, Amber and Timothy finally split. And at the time, Amber had the children. But Tim stopped paying the bills at the home where they lived. On June 7th, 2012, they filed for divorce, and Timothy took the 3 oldest kids and went to live with his father in Mississippi. Amber still cared for their youngest child at the time, Gabriel. On June 26th, Amber made the trip down to Mississippi to get her children, but Timothy refused to turn them over to her. And just over a month later, on July 30th, a judge granted Timothy temporary custody of all 4 children.
Yeah, so now even baby Gabriel would be away from his mother. And Amber wanted all of her children.
Yeah, it seems super unfair.
Yeah, but she also felt like she couldn't put up much of a fight at the time because she wasn't making enough money to support them all.
This devastated her, so Amber decided it was best to co-parent with Tim. On August 16th, 2012, Timothy took Gabriel to Mississippi, and Amber, who was 6 months pregnant, went to stay with her mother in Ohio for a while. At the end of the year, on December 2nd, 2012, Abigail Elizabeth Jones was born, but her name was later changed to Elaine Marie.
Yeah, so that's why she has 2 names. I'm guessing, I couldn't find it officially anywhere, but I'm guessing her mom named her Abigail, and then maybe Tim changed her name to Elaine Marie.
Yeah, that's very bizarre.
Yeah, so anyway, that's that.
In October of 2013, the divorce was finalized, and due to the financial situation, Timothy Jones was awarded primary custody of all 5 children. At the time, he was 31 and she was 27.
Yeah, so for this to happen,
Wow.
a judge must have really thought that he was the favorable parent in this situation.
I guess. I'm not seeing the red flags with her being a mom right now, but
Right.
it's just bizarre. Well, now we're going to fast forward to Tuesday, September 2nd, 2014.
And tomorrow, actually the day we release this, is September 2nd. And I'm not purposely picking cases that are close to the anniversary of the date, but it's kind of happening that way.
Yeah.
At the time of the release, it's been exactly 6 years since this happened. So,
Wow.
you want to get into that?
Mm-hmm. At this time, Abigail-Elaine was 1, Gabriel was 2, Nahtahn was 6, Elias was 7, and Merah Gracie was 8 years old. That Tuesday, they were scheduled to visit their mom at her home, but Timothy never brought them over. Well, Amber was disappointed, but was not able to get in contact with him. After contacting the school, Amber learned that her 3 oldest kids had been absent from school for the past 3 days: Friday, Monday, and Tuesday.
So, maybe Tim just took a trip without telling her or something? And they're out of town?
Maybe. The next day, on September 3rd, Amber reported her children and her ex-husband missing, but had no idea where to even begin to look.
Yeah. So, he wasn't responding to her calls, which was really worrying her, which is probably why she reported them missing. But they had a neighbor, Tim had a neighbor named Christina Elke, and she also regularly babysat the kids. She had been caring for Gabriel and Abigail the last day the kids were in school before the disappearance, and she had actually gotten a call from Tim after this.
When investigators questioned her, she talked about a call that she had gotten from him after he'd picked the kids up on the 28th. He told her he was taking the kids and leaving South Carolina to get a fresh start and would not be returning. He also told her that since he still owed her money for babysitting, she was free to let herself into his former home and take whatever she could find as compensation. What?
So that's an odd call to get, isn't it?
Yeah, let yourself into my house and just take whatever you want. That's bizarro.
Especially if he says he's not coming back, like, is it his house anymore? Or?
Like, he's just not going to lock the door and just, that's it?
Yeah, something fishy is going on here. But Amber was still trying to get a hold of him, and he was not answering. And now that they're reported missing, the authorities were also trying to find him, but there was nothing. Over a week passed, and finally on September 6th, something happened.
Right. Timothy Jones was on the road in Mississippi and was passing through a vehicle safety checkpoint in Smith County. But he was by himself in the car. And at first, this didn't raise alarms for the officials on site, but they also realized that he seemed to be intoxicated. So, Timothy was detained and his information was run through the system, and his car was searched. This led to him being arrested on a DUI and drug possession charges. He apparently had been carrying chemicals used to both make meth and a street drug known as spice,
which is apparently synthetic weed. But these weren't the only things they found. While running his info, they must have come across the missing children reports and that he himself was reported missing. And when they looked further into his car, they found evidence that led to a shocking revelation. So we want to warn you, this is when it really starts to get disturbing.
Yeah. The interior of Tim's Cadillac Escalade had blood stains, and officials noted what they could only describe as the smell of death coming from inside the car. They also found cleaning materials, indicating that Timothy had tried to cover up whatever had happened here.
And of course, the fact that the missing children were absent indicated foul play. So thankfully, they were able to slap him with these drug charges in order to hold him in jail while they investigated this further.
On Monday, September 8th, Timothy finally opened up to the investigators and told them what had happened.
So now we're going to go through the details of the interview he did on September 8th. Again, be warned, there's a lot of disturbing stuff in this, but we'll try to be as sensitive as possible without losing the gravity of what happened. Now, unfortunately, when they first began the interview, the investigator apparently forgot to start the recording.
What?
So when the recording actually starts, Timothy kind of mocks them a bit for that. But then they asked him what happened and started to get into it.
It was a Thursday at the end of a school day. Timothy Jones picked up his 3 older children from elementary school, and then his 2 youngest at the neighbor Christina's house. Apparently, they had made a trip to Walmart after this, because Jones had been charged with unlawful neglect after forcing his kids, including 1-year-old Abigail, out of a car near a Walmart in Lexington County, South Carolina.
Yeah, so this part wasn't in the confession. It just came up later from a police report, and I couldn't find any more details about this incident than that, but it sounds like he was just caught trying to abandon his kids at Walmart or something.
Gosh.
But anyway, back to the confession.
He said that later that night, his 6-year-old son Nahtahn had blown out some electrical outlets in the living room, and that he questioned him about it. Tim said he asked Nahtahn several times what had happened, but he wasn't getting any responses out of him. That's bizarre. That's when he decided to use more harsh measures and started forcing him to do physical exercise, like push-ups and squats, as a way to get him to tell the truth. This went on for about an hour.
And according to Tim, this was nothing out of the ordinary. He called it PT, or physical training, and said we had fun doing it.
After an hour, Tim got tired of it and sent Nahtahn to bed.
And when he recounted this in the interview, he tried to make it sound like he was talking to Nahtahn like a buddy, basically like, "You're not telling the truth, I can't help you, go to bed, man. You're wasting everybody's time," basically. Is what he says he told Nahtahn. And it's hard to comprehend how it would go from that to what we now know happened. But
It's weird to me that he says that he got tired, not Nahtahn, his kid, who he's making do exercises.
yeah, and we'll share more details that came out later. But
He continued, saying, "Then I came back and found out that he was deceased. And when I found out he was deceased, then all the SH hits the fan."
so the first time he showed any emotion in this interview was when he said the hit the fan. You know, there was nothing when he talked about finding his son deceased, and I just think that's worth noting because it either seems like he's forcing the emotion, realizing that he just said he found his son dead, or else he's more emotionally upset about what happened rather than that his son is dead.
So
you know?
he's saying that he just made Nahtahn do a few push-ups and then found him dead after sleeping? Like, I don't...
Pretty much.
Interesting.
Anyway.
He said after this, voices started going off and paranoia set in. He was in shock at what had just happened. He left the other kids at home and went to a convenience store to buy cigarettes. He said that on the way home, he heard a creepy gremlin voice talking, telling him to kill his other 4 children. When he returned home, he killed the other 4 children one by one with his hands around their necks. First Merah, then Elias, Gabriel, and Abigail.
So the interview is 48 minutes long, but I just want to play this clip from it so you can hear how he sounded when he described this.
So Nahtahn was dead, and then what happened?
And I followed suit with the other 4.
And how did you
So
kill
that
them?
was with my hands.
With your hands? Can you describe what you mean by with your hands?
Around their neck.
Around their neck? Okay.
Who was next?
I'm just gonna put the order so I don't have to go into too much detail.
Okay. Just tell us the order.
Nahtahn, Merah, Elias, Gabriel. Wait. Nahtahn, Eli, Merah, Gabriel, Elaine.
And when did you say this was, Tim? What date? You told us earlier.
Thursday, I think. They were supposed to go to school Friday and they didn't go because, well, they couldn't go.
Yeah. And you said also that this happened where?
The house.
Can you tell me what that address was?
2155B, South Lake Drive.
What county is that in, Tim?
Lexington, South Carolina.
Lexington, South Carolina.
I just wanted to play that because I thought it was really odd the way his emotions seemed to just be turning off and on, you know, like forced emotion.
Right, right.
Which, according to Derek Van Schaik, who you know I like to watch, can be a sign of deception or disingenuous speech. So that's just my opinion from listening to it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to hear someone confess to killing all their children like that. Like, oh.
I know.
But yeah, there's something about his confession that doesn't seem very genuine to me. Especially when he's like, oh, wait. Like, had to rethink the order. And he was like, I'm going to tell you the order because I don't want to tell you details. I don't know. It's just bizarre.
It's just weird how he's able to turn off the emotion to say, wait.
Yeah.
But then almost sounds forced when he's listing the names.
Right.
Like, how can you talk about killing your kids like that and then just turn off your emotion?
Right. After the killings, Tim loaded the children's lifeless bodies into his car in the middle seats and covered them in blankets and air fresheners.
And he claims he really didn't have a plan for what he would do, but when they searched his car, they found a clipboard in the front seat with some really disturbing notes on it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, disgusting. There were several handwritten to-do lists with various 3-day plans for what to do with the children's remains. One list said, number 1, head to campground. 2, melt bodies. 3, sand bones down to dust or small pieces. How can you even, you're a dad, how could you even write that down? I know.
And after melt bodies, there was an exclamation point. Like, what an idiotic thing for a criminal to do, writing these plans on paper and making a tangible piece of evidence and then keeping it in your car. It just seems really dumb. But how could you even write this in the first place?
And this wasn't the only gruesome list that he'd written. Another one said, Day 1, burn up bodies. Day 2, sand down bones. Day 3, MB with a smiley face. Dissolve and discard.
Apparently, MB was meant to stand for Mexican border. I don't know why he felt the need to write that in code, but had no problem writing melt bodies. But regardless of how dumb this makes him look, it was actually used as a way to prove his sanity during trial because of his thought-out plans to hide his crime and evade law enforcement. Because, of course, he tried to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. And we'll talk more about some past things that could have aided that defense. But also reasons why it didn't work.
Yeah.
And red flags. And I just gotta say, throughout this whole thing, when you listen to his confession, it's so self-focused. It's not focused on what he did to his kids or what he did to his family. It's focused on how it affected him. He was constantly saying stuff like, well, I realized I effed up my life, so I was just trying to do anything I could to protect myself. And, like, you're just digging yourself a deeper hole, dude, because it's not about you messing up your life. You took away 5 lives.
Right.
From these helpless kids.
Okay. Well, Tim made the drive from South Carolina to Alabama, stopping at a Dunkin' Donuts in Spartanburg, South Carolina on September 1st. On September 3rd, Tim drove to the Walmart in West Columbia and bought some hand saws, a multi-saw, a 5-gallon pail, dust masks, and muriatic acid.
Yeah, muriatic acid, which is also known as hydrochloric acid.
Got that at Walmart?
I guess so. Well, it's used to remove rust. It's also used to unclog drains. So it's very corrosive. But you'd think a shopping list like this would set off some red flags.
Seriously. Maybe he did the self-checkout line.
Yeah.
But even then, you'd think that those scanners would have some type of...
Well, I don't think they do.
No?
Like the murder kit flag.
The murder kit flag, exactly. On September 4th, in Orangeburg, he visited a dollar store and bought trash bags. At this time, his children's bodies were still in the car. The next evening, on Friday, September 5th, Tim had pulled over on the side of the road to compose himself. And when he tried to leave the spot, he got stuck in the ditch. Good.
Yeah. And a police officer actually stopped to help. But this officer was there. Kids had been sitting in the car for over a week, and he didn't notice anything.
How do you not notice a smell or his odd... I'm sure he was acting super weird.
Yeah, that's exactly what the interviewer said during his confession.
That's bizarre.
He was just floored that an officer came in contact with his car and didn't smell anything.
The next morning, at 8:18 a.m., he stopped at a grocery store in Greenville, Alabama, to buy 10 packs of cigarettes and candy bars. Then, at 1:06 p.m., he stopped in Camden, Alabama, and took out $500 in cash with plans to go to Vegas. Oh my gosh, this guy. At some point between these two last stops, he stopped in a wooded rural area and disposed of his children.
So we won't go into the details about that, but it's just absolutely awful that he planned to just dump them off and then head to Vegas and have a good time.
Right, that's, like, are you kidding me?
Again, so self-focused. And after the confession, he was charged with unlawful conduct toward a child to extend his jail stay while they searched for the children.
The next day, Timothy agreed to lead investigators to where the 5 children were. He led them to Alabama, down a rural road in Lexington County, where investigators found the bodies of all 5 children. 2 days later, on September 11th, he was extradited to Lexington County, Alabama, and charged with 5 counts of murder. The next day, he waived his first court appearance, saying he didn't want to further the spectacle.
So...
Okay. The trial for the murder charges didn't happen until June 6, 2019, even after a full confession less than 2 weeks after the murders.
And I can't wrap my head around that. The fact that Amber and the rest of the family need to have this trial haunting them for 5 years before they can get it over with, when they have all the evidence within a couple of weeks, is just heartbreaking. And there's footage of Amber on the stand during this trial. It's just so hard to watch because she has to relive the pain she felt throughout this whole ordeal.
Right.
Which we'll get into. But before we get into that, Rosie, what do you think about this so far?
Honestly, I feel like this is one of the most bizarre and just doesn't make sense, puzzling cases. Because, like, if what he's saying is correct, he pretty much killed all of his children because one of the kids was messing around with the electrical cord. Like, what? It just does not add up.
Well, there are a lot of factors we haven't discussed yet that go into this case, between mental illness and drugs and also some personal stuff that was going on that contributed to this. But yeah, this is bizarre behavior, and it's hard to believe what he did and then how he responded to it. But Amber took the stand during trial, like we mentioned, so you want to talk about that?
She talked about how she called the kids every night at 7 p.m., and the night of August 28th was no different to her.
Again, that was the night that he committed all these murders.
When she called that night, Timothy picked up the phone, agitated and upset with Nahtahn. Amber could hear Nahtahn crying in the background and asked to go on the speakerphone. She asked what happened, and he said, "Mom, I didn't mean to." She heard Tim in the background yelling, "You could have killed yourself, son." but Amber tried to calm the boy down. He was gasping for air and could barely catch his breath.
Probably because Tim was forcing him to do squats and push-ups.
Right.
And even worse, like, if he was out of breath before Tim did that, who knows if this was before or after that. But instead of Tim being grateful that Nahtahn didn't hurt himself when he was messing with the outlet and using it as a teachable moment, he wouldn't let it go, and it was overcome with rage and a twisted need for revenge on this little boy.
Tim got even more angry when he heard Amber trying to comfort Nahtahn and said, "Why are you always defending the kids?" She replied, "I think he's gotten the point. I'm tired of hearing my kids crying all the time." And after that, he told her to shut the F up and hung up on her. She tried calling back at least 6 times, but no one answered. And that was the last time she spoke to her children.
This is so sad to watch her tell this story again. That this terrible, stressful situation was the last time she ever got to talk to her kids. And Nahtahn, the one that Tim was mad at here, was her middle child. And she had a sweet nickname for him. She called him Tater. And, she loved him a lot. She also told the court how Nathan's favorite toy was his Woody doll from Toy Story.
Oh, that makes me want to cry.
I know.
When police searched the mobile home where Tim had lived, they found the Woody doll smashed to pieces. So, he did that. I mean,
Yeah,
what?
He must have lost his temper on Nahtahn a lot. And we'll get into that more later. But, how could a father do this to just one of his children?
And how could the judge have granted this guy full custody? I'm
Exactly. But, this guy did it to all of his children.
Mm-hmm.
So there were some excuses he made. And you want to talk about what one of those was?
Mm-hmm. So, according to his lawyers, Timothy said that he had shown up at the house at 7:30 a.m. on June 11, 2012. This was just a few days after filing for divorce. He found Amber sleeping with a 19-year-old next-door neighbor. Timothy claims that this snapped something in him, which led to his horrific outburst 2 years later, where he took the lives of his children after they expressed that they wanted to be with their mom.
So
I'm not really buying that.
Well, yeah. This is according to an affidavit filed by Timothy's lawyers, so the validity of this claim is really murky, but it pales in comparison to what Timothy did, especially given that they had already filed for divorce. So why did he care about infidelity after he left her?
Right.
Just seems really unfair to me.
He's now blaming what he has done on Amber for what she had done 2 years prior.
Exactly. And what's really sad about this is some stupid shill media company, I can't remember who it was, but they used this as a headline that
of course
wife's infidelity led to the murder of 5 children. And I'm just, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Could you possibly take advantage of this situation more for clicks?
Right.
But I guess we've covered this pretty well, but just that he's able to shift the blame to her and his lawyers go along with it. It's just weird how that works.
Well, Amber testified during the trial for the murder of her 5 children.
While she testified, she spoke about how no one in her family, herself included, saw any red flags that would lead them to believe that Timothy couldn't be trusted with the children, which is absolutely terrifying to me. It reminds me of that Lie to Me episode we just watched where that kid beats Lightman's lie detection because he was a psychopath. Yeah. He beat it because he was a psychopath, which made his facial cues the opposite of most people, making him come across as charming. I'm not saying Timothy is a psychopath because I have no idea, but I'm just saying it's so scary when people who have the potential to kill show absolutely no signs of it and can even be charming. But quickly on the topic of psychopaths and Timothy Jones Jr., I do want to recommend a video on the YouTube channel Live Abuse Free. And I think just in general, a lot of our listeners would really enjoy her channel. It's run by Zoe, who has a Bachelor's of Science degree in psychology and has worked as a therapist. And she did a video talking a bit about Timothy Jones Jr., as well as Chris Watts, who we've covered before, and then Patrick Frazee, and if they're psychopaths or not. And she's much more qualified than we are, if you're interested, but again, it's Live Abuse Free is the channel name. But speaking of red flags, even though Amber she said during trial she didn't really notice any that would lead her to think something this extreme would happen.
Mm-hmm.
But there definitely were some in the past. So Rosie, you want to go over some of the things from Timothy's past that we haven't discussed yet?
I sure do. Tim's criminal history goes all the way back to 2001, before he was married. In March of 2001, he was arrested with cocaine at the age of 19.
Now, he was young. It could have just been a dumb mistake, but 6 months later, he was arrested again.
Yeah, in September of 2001, he was charged with burglary, car theft, and forged checks. In March of 2002, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison in Illinois, but got out in less than a year in January of 2003. Well, how does that work?
Yeah, maybe they were giving him the benefit of the doubt for good behavior or something. So, personally, even up to this point, I'd say, he was young and dumb. Maybe he's learned his lesson and turned his life around. But we know that didn't happen.
Mm-mm.
So what were some other things that happened later?
On September 5th, 2011, after visiting relatives in Mississippi with the kids, a complaint was made to social services about Tim's treatment of the children. They visited the home on September 16th, but weren't able to make contact. Finally, on the 29th, they found Amber, who was pregnant at the time, along with her 3 children aged 3, 4, and 5. They determined the kids were clean and in good health, and despite some clutter in the home, it was deemed okay for the children, as long as they cleaned up the house. They returned the next day to verify that the home was cleaner. But on October 18th, they made a surprise visit to find the home cluttered again, with a floor air vent cover missing.
So basically, there's a hole in the floor leading into the air ducts. But again, they told them to clean up and returned on the 21st to find the home cleaned and in acceptable condition.
A few days later, on October 24th, a social services supervisor recommended the case be unfounded.
Which basically means they drop it.
So 4 days later, they visited the home again, but this time Tim was home and was hostile to the caseworker.
Which is weird. They were so close to this case being dropped, but then they show up in Tim's home and he's a jerk. They would have stopped investigating him if he wasn't a jerk. Not that the investigation really helped, but police were called to assist, and Jones was given another list of what to fix and clean. And then they ended up ordering the family to stay in a hotel for the children's safety until the list was done and the work was approved.
Yikes.
They didn't feel like the children were safe at home the way it was.
It was not good. Very not good. On October 31st, they returned to find only Tim at home, which was extremely clean.
Yeah, So it's kind of a pattern here,
That's really weird. After this, the case was declared unfounded on November 4th, but the case was resigned on December 9th to a new DSS worker. They didn't visit until February 25th, shortly after Gabriel's birth. This time, the home met the minimal standard and the children were in good health. 2 months later, on April 25th, they found the same thing, but at this point, Tim and Amber had been separated, and at the time, all the children were living with Amber. On May 29th, though, when the DSS visited again, Amber told them that she had filed domestic violence reports the previous weekend against Tim. They suggested that she go to a shelter, but she decided not to.
Yeah, so back in May of 2012, 2 years before this all happened, Tim had been getting violent, and she reported it. But somehow, he was still able to get primary custody? How does that work?
It doesn't work, obviously. On June 18th, Amber let DSS know that Tim had taken the children down to Mississippi with him. They told her to contact the police and an attorney and go to a shelter. Despite Amber's reports of violence, DSS closed the case on October 16th, 2012, saying, "The risk is reduced and services were no longer needed."
So that sounds like a misfire. Like, they shouldn't have
Seems
done
like a
that.
stretch.
Maybe they marked it wrong? Was there some kind of oopsie in the paperwork? I don't understand how once violence is introduced into this case, they decide they can close it.
Yeah, I don't either.
Like, when they kept pursuing it over and over when they had very little evidence, and then all of a sudden it's closed. But the case was reopened again in May of 2014 when something else came up.
Right. Karen Leonhardt, the school nurse where Nahtahn went, had made a report to social services. She photographed bruises on his neck and forearms. At this time, Nahtahn was living with his father.
But again, despite this clear evidence of abuse, he was still able to get custody. It seems like with all of this, Tim had a real problem with Nahtahn. It seems like his behavior really got under Tim's skin, and Tim just lost it on him.
Tim was interviewed after these allegations, along with the children. They told DSS that their father likes to horseplay and makes them do exercise for punishment. One of the children was reported as having a mark on their neck, but according to DSS, the children did not seem afraid of their father.
I mean, this kind of seems rehearsed. They all said he likes to horseplay.
Right.
Yeah. It's like he's convincing the children that what he's doing isn't serious. And they don't know any better because they're kids and they don't really know the difference between right and wrong yet.
On May 15th, 2014, DSS visited the home to find the family celebrating Merah's birthday with cupcakes. Tim told DSS that their mother had walked out on him for a younger man and hadn't seen the kids in 4 months. They reported his interaction with the kids as good.
So he left out the part about him taking the kids and moving to a different state.
Right.
But okay.
On June 16th, Tim admits to DSS that he physically disciplines the kids, and they provided a safety plan with no physical discipline allowed.
So basically, in order to maintain custody, from this point on, Timothy was not allowed to punish the kids physically.
On August 7th, the month the kids died, DSS and police examined the children after another anonymous complaint that came in against Tim. They found that Jones appeared to be overwhelmed, as he is unable to maintain the home, but the children appear to be clean, groomed, and appropriately dressed. After this, they were to have a follow-up visit within 45 days.
But as we know now, that was too late.
So there's been more than one anonymous complaint.
Mm-hmm. And we're about to talk about one of them.
A former babysitter of the children named Joy Lorick testified during the trial of Timothy Jones Jr.
Yeah, she had cared for the children during the summer of 2014, after Timothy and Amber had split up. And according to her, the living conditions within the mobile home where Tim lived with the kids was pretty awful.
Joy said that the house was full of trash, dirty dishes, and dirty clothes. Because Timothy didn't keep the home clean, they had a roach problem. It made Joy very uncomfortable, as it would make everybody.
Yes.
She did what she could, washing dishes and picking up the trash and the clothes when she was there. At some point, she had accompanied Timothy and the kids on a morning trip to Myrtle Beach, While they were there, she said Tim took the 3 older kids down to the water while she stayed and watched the 2 youngest. During that time, she heard Tim yelling and looked up to see what was going on. He was floating in the water, really far out from the beach, and telling his kids that they were missing out, apparently trying to coax them into going with him.
Yeah.
What?
Out.
So he wants them to drown.
Yeah, just wait. This isn't the only thing he did at the beach.
During Joy's testimony, they also played a video that Tim took of his kids on the beach, where he tells one of his daughters to go get that big wave.
Oh, she was a toddler.
When she did start going into the water, he yelled, "Keep going!" After which she ran up to him to show him a shell that she found.
Which is really sad to see how much she loved him, you know? She was excited to show him a shell that she picked up on the beach. But he claims, that this murder was all an act of passion and that the voices told him to do it. But that same summer, he's trying to get his small children to go into the ocean. And given everything that happened, it really seems like he was just trying to get them to drown, like you said.
After this trip to the beach, on June 30th, 2014, Tim took the kids and the babysitter down to Florida to go to Disney World and SeaWorld. It was a long road trip, and the kids began to get agitated. Tim told the kids that if they didn't stop, he'd pull over and make them do squats. But the babysitter wouldn't let him.
I almost wonder if this was his way of physically punishing them without putting his hands on them.
Could
because legally he wasn't supposed to touch them, but, he was still going to physically harm them somehow.
When they finally got there, Timothy left the kids with her and went to a bar. While he was at the bar, Nahtahn started jumping around and Joy asked him to stop, and Gabriel started screaming and crying. She was asking them to stop, but at the same time, Tim walked in coming home from the bar. He said, "I know I just heard her tell you to stop and you didn't." Then he pulled down both of their pants and spanked them with a belt in front of Joy. She asked him to stop, and he did.
But remember, at this point, after multiple run-ins with social services, Tim was ordered by social services not to lay his hands on the kids for physical punishment in order to maintain custody. And sure, his belt isn't technically his hand, but it still counts.
How seriously uncomfortable that must have been for Joy.
Right?
Then she must have felt guilt for what had happened.
Yeah, and there were other things going on that she felt weird about. This wasn't her first experience where she's like, this guy needs to be stopped.
Right. Joy was also worried that the children weren't getting enough to eat. When they went to McDonald's, all 5 kids had to share a 20-piece McNugget and 1 order of fries.
That's okay. So 5 kids.
That's 4 pieces each.
And then 1 order of fries. I don't know. I mean, they're all varying ages. They all require different amounts of food.
Mm-hmm.
When you get a Happy Meal, you get 4 nuggets, but you also get your own fry, and you get, apple slices, and you get pop or something like that, milk. But
At home, all Joy had to feed them was oatmeal. The youngest kids would often be screaming in hunger when she arrived. She'd leave at 7 p.m. before they had dinner, so she didn't know if they had much to eat for dinner. But she did say that if she fed them, the kids would ask her not to tell their dad because then he wouldn't feed them.
Which says a lot about what kind of life these poor kids had if they feared him that much.
Joy remembers seeing a picture of the kids with their mom and asking them, "Who's that?" And they said, "That's our mommy. I wish you could meet our mommy."
So they really loved being with their mom.
But they were never allowed to talk about their mom around Tim. He had actually told Joy that the children didn't have respect for women, but Joy said that they would have respect for her if she was around them. She told him that it was him who didn't have respect for women and had an attitude that women should be seen and not heard. Yikes.
Yeah. Good for her for standing up for herself and saying, like, no, if they're going to be around me, they're going to respect me. You
Yeah.
know? You've had to do that in the past.
True. I also, like, man, she had some guts to tell him that he had a problem with women.
Right?
Joy also recounted a time where Tim had the kids show her what they had to do as a punishment, and Eli and Merah walked out carrying a big bedpost and started doing squats with it.
Again, he's looking for any way he can physically punish the kids without violating his little rules.
Right. Joy remembers thinking, they're just kids, and being in shock. In August of 2014, Joy made a call to social services to report the spankings Tim gave on the trip to Florida, as well as a black eye that she had seen on Eli, the oldest son.
And that was the anonymous complaint we talked about from August. But again, like we see so often, nothing was done in time to help the children. Despite the repeated calls and the violation of DSS orders, they left the kids with him, and now we know where it led. Not that DSS could have possibly known what was going to happen, but I don't understand how they could let so many things go and
Right.
were able to give these kids to Tim full custody, you know?
Well, also,
so
it's
weird.
like, Tim obviously didn't want the children, so why wouldn't he give them
Yeah.
to their mom?
Why was he fighting for them?
But it seemed like it was just a revenge tactic. It had nothing to do with the kids.
Yeah, that's the way it seems. But that's where we'll pick back up next week. We're not done with this story because there's a lot more to it. We'll talk about the trial and the testimony of the family and Tim's past and family and some mental issues and also drugs that may have played a huge role in what happened. So, anyway,
Yuck.
we've gotten through the most difficult part of this, at least. The children.
Yeah, this was an icky one.
I know.
I mean, that's a dumb word to use to describe it, but I just feel icky.
I don't think it's dumb. I think it's very accurate. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. So, anyway, we'll wrap it up. We'll just skip everything else this week because I don't want to draw attention away from the story. But thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
All right, bye.